I had the best time. I remember staying up till 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning with Emily talking about how, and it started because her and her friends were hanging out at this little spot in the neighborhood. They would all get together and just hang out at this spot. And it sparked a memory for me about how me and my friends would hang out at the green thing, which was an electric, if you guys know neighborhoods and the electric feed, and you guys know what I'm talking about with the big green generator looking thing. We would all hang out there and talk for hours and be goofy and play. But it sparked that conversation, and it was transcending about how my generation and her generation were typically doing the same thing. They were hanging out, and it was a great memory, and I like to share those kind of memories.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Everything's Okay, a mental health podcast brought to you by Crazy Ant Media. Today's episode is all about memories, the ones that lift you up and the ones that threaten to tear us down. We'll be talking about how memories shape our mental health overall and why our brains hold on to some moments tighter than others, and how we can deal and heal from the ones that still sting just a little bit. Maybe it's the smell of your grandma's cooking. Maybe it's something that makes you feel safe. Maybe it's the sound of a slam door that pulls you right back into a fight that you never even wanted to remember. Maybe it's an embarrassing moment that replays at 2 a.m. and keeps you from forgiving yourself and keeps you up all night. But man, oh man, it's got to be a freaking phenomenal episode. I'm super excited about it. And as always, I'm joined by my co host and father in law, Dustin. How are you today?
I am fantastic. And this is going to be an interesting one because I feel like, one of the biggest mental health challenges that we see nowadays, right, that's really just made a surge and that I feel like a lot of people can relate to is anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to be honest with you, I think anxiety stems from the very issue that we're talking about today, memories, right? Because I feel like a lot of the people that suffer from anxiety, it's sparked by they remember something just out of nowhere, and then they start panicking about it, or they start diving deep into it, and it causes stress, it causes anxiety. And of course that we're talking about the bad memories in that case, but I think it does heavily play into it, and in my opinion, more on the negative side than the positive side. So this is going to be a really interesting conversation because I know you struggle with anxiety. I know my daughter slash your wife struggles with anxiety. I have at times struggled with it. So it's a relevant subject. And I think memories, I'm ready to dive down memory lane and see where we go.
That's right. And I mean, we will, of course, want to start off by explaining a little bit how memories work because it's a couple of different ways. You have quick, simple explanations of short term and long term memory. Now, short term memory briefly holds a small amount of information for a few seconds to minutes, while long term memory stores information much longer periods. Potentially years, even. Short term memories act as temporary workspace for a current task, while long term memory are more permanent storage for past experiences. Like short term, remembering to pick up some milk at the grocery store
Right.
before coming home. Long term, remembering in first grade, I wanted to run away from school at recess.
That's right.
Like, it's so weird because both of these things hold weight in our brain, right? I mean, those long term memories, whatever they may be, the good or the positive, or the bad or the positive, they completely hold a place in our brain to where something random will always trigger it,
Yeah.
like you were talking about anxiety or depression or any other manic episodes that someone could potentially go through throughout life. It could be triggered by a long term, or could be triggered by something that could trigger a long term memory that will put you back into a dark place. Because I know I have before in the past. Recently I've been on a really good tear. I've been feeling really good about life, confident,
Yeah.
awesome. But in the past, there has been certain things that do bring you back to certain memories that you don't necessarily want to relive, but for some reason, it's been such a deep, impactful thing that it's been carried with you throughout the years.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you have something like that as well.
Oh, for me, and I don't know if this is a common occurrence for a lot of people, or if I'm just like a freakoid, or like what. But my good and bad memories, they're linked. Like typically, the memories that I have represent both. It'll spark a really good time in my life and a horrible time in my life from the same memory, from the same event. And for the most part, that's how my memories are. So it's really challenging for me to try to get into a headspace where something will remind me of, like for example, I'll be watching a football game, and something will happen, and that'll spark a really great memory that I have with my little brother, because football was really something that we shared and had a passion for, and that we really. But then when I start thinking about that, it inevitably, without doubt, the next one, he's not here anymore, and that triggers the memory of him passing, and it's forever linked. So I can't separate having a good memory of my little brother without going to the bad memory of losing him. And so it seems to be like that with all of my memories. What about you? Are yours linked like that? Because like I find it odd, but maybe normal, that you experience something that brings you so much joy, and then within seconds it's like, oh man, this is a crushing moment, and I don't even want to think about this. Like in the same span of like a minute and a half. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely linked. I feel like, because the reason I came up with the idea for this podcast, my friend passing away, and I do feel like, it almost every time we record an episode of Everything's Okay, I think about it because I think about where the show even stemmed from.
Right.
But I'm like thinking about memories the other day, like of us jumping off of a cliff into a waterbed or into a river. And then, of course, inevitably, you're right, that does lead back to, yeah, he's not here anymore, and leads back to the last time you spent with that person,
Right.
or all of these different things. So, yeah, it is very weird because, like, when I think about memories, say with my dad, it's one of those things where, like, there's all of these good things. I remember having new shoes for basketball games and taking pride in that because my dad took pride in his shoes, but then it inevitably turns back into a negative connotation or a negative story that, I have probably even forgiven him about, but just because that memory is still there and it still holds weight in my life. And that's the thing. I don't know how to alleviate that weight even after you've already forgiven someone for what they've done. But yeah, I mean, it's a one step in front of the other, like everything
Yeah.
else in life, where it leads into either a really good place or a really bad place.
Well, and a lot of times you will bury those memories, right? Like I say all the time. I think you and I have had this conversation numerous times, and me with Emily, and me with people that are close to me. I don't really remember anything prior to around 7 or 8 years old when my dad died. I
Hmm.
I buried it, and I'm sure they're there, right? I'm sure the memories are there. I'll recall a certain thing here or a certain thing there. But what I think is really going on, and this is typical too, guys. This is a normal occurrence when you put away those memories. You choose for whatever reason, pain or whatever, to not want to remember that. Your brain sometimes will distort the facts. It'll fill in gaps with stuff that may or may not be true. It might just be your brain trying to manifest a memory for you to get past a difficult time with something that may or may not have even occurred, or may have occurred in a much different way. And I'm fairly certain that a lot of my memories prior to my dad dying might be exactly that. Recalling something that was a happy moment for me, but not really sure if that was real or not. Am I putting something that I know was partly there and partly, and then making this memory out of these little pieces to somehow fill that gap. Maybe I think that's a lot of what's going on prior to my dad dying, which is crazy because that's 7 8 years of my life, and to just go nope, no, not I don't remember, and it's weird, because the rest of my family can talk about it. Oh yeah, you remember when we were two and we did this? Like, no, sure don't. I don't remember, and so that can be difficult too, right? Because it matters with your memories because it does, whether you want them to or not, affect your other relationships in your life, family, friends, significant others, because it can spark good and bad things, and unfortunately that can play a lot of turmoil, not just in a good way, but turmoil in a bad way with relationships that you have in your life, right?
Yeah, most definitely. And I mean, would you say that's probably why you don't? Because I mean, you bring up stories about your brother all the time, but I mean, you rarely ever talk about your dad. So do you feel like that's probably partially the reason why? It's because you remember things, but even things that you think you remember, you think may or may not be skewed because of different things and traumas and stuff like that?
I think so. Every time I try to go back and think about why I don't remember a lot about my dad, or why I choose not to, I guess, is my theory on it is that death, what was my introduction into what would become a very tragic timeline in my lifetime, where I lose so many people. Death has become just like abnormally normal in my life, and that's the sparking point. That was the ignition that started it all. That ignited my fear of death, my hate of death, my not being able to deal with death or loss. So my theory is I just tried my very best to erase it, to just
Mm.
not
Mhm.
remember it, so that I can deal with loss. And I guess my reasoning is if I forget the first loss, the trauma that caused, maybe it can ease the rest of the loss that I do remember. So that's my theory on it. I don't know, but that's what I think it is, because you're right. I can remember all the way back yesterday, like telling you things about Joe when I was 8 and he was a baby, and that's the same time period when my dad was still alive. But I couldn't tell you anything about how my dad interacted with Joe. Was there an interaction there? Did I don't know. I legitimately don't remember any of that. So I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
curious though if anybody's out there listening. If you have an explanation, or like what that may or may not be, hit us up. 'Cause
Yes.
I'm curious.
Please.
I'm
Yeah,
curious.
it is very interesting too because like when you're remembering things with people who are still alive, like you never think, yeah, and they're still alive. But
Right.
when you're remembering people or remembering instances with people who have passed on, it always inevitably ends up to the point of, yeah, they've passed on, right?
Exactly.
And then it becomes a sadder, more somber moment. But I mean, for example, the first time I ever had to deal with death was I was 12, I think, in my sixth grade. It was my grandpa. I hadn't seen him in probably 4 years, 5 years. So I mean, between the age of like 7 to 12, like that's or 8 to 12, however long it that's a pretty substantial amount of time in a very young pubescent
Yeah.
person,
Without
I mean,
doubt.
that's a lot of memories that are developing very, rapidly. And while you're starting to actually garner real memories that you will eventually carry with you the whole life. But I remember there was this place called Guntown Mountain in Kentucky where you literally had to ride like one of those snow lifts or and ski lifts to get up to
Yeah.
the town. And it was this old Western reenactment town basically that he would take me to like every summer. So it's things like that that I miss, but then of course it inevitably leads to yes, and then he passed on, and then also what is always so sad for me, especially with like younger years, because I remember how close I was with my grandfather, like, but the last time I talked to him or had any interaction with him was like at the age of 7 or 8, like I said, but like I don't remember his voice. Like that's always a thing that I get terrified about. Like after people pass on, you're not gonna remember their voice unless you have like voice recordings of them, obviously.
Right.
So that's always a big thing for me. I always wish there was like when that time comes, and our technology is ever evolving every single day, but when that time comes, I think, not to get morbid, I would want to record like a final message for my loved ones that
Mm,
I'm leaving
mm.
behind so that they can always have it, know that I'm happy, know that I'm okay, and know that they could continue chasing their dreams so that they know this last message that I can send to them is positive instead of the last message is negative or the last thing you remember is death. So yeah, it's very weird.
It really is, and it's funny because all of my memories that I associate with my younger life are basically 10 and up. You
Yeah.
know, I say 8. You know, I do remember some things after my dad died briefly. You know, the move to Florida and stuff like that. But basically, it's from the moment we were in Florida on that I
Hmm.
really associate all of my memories of my youth, good, bad, and ugly, and everything in between. From that point on, it's like my life started at 10, which is really weird. But and I have a lot of great memories, and there are so many things that, like, I definitely have songs that trigger just phenomenal memories for me. Certain places that I'll go that I was with somebody at, or and those are all really good. I mean, I don't want to say that every time I start diving deep back into my memories or let my memories play into that it's all negative. I have really good stuff that if a song comes on the car, I will belt it out, and it puts me in just a jubilant mood, because it reminds me of something that was really awesome to me or a really great time for me. And so, and I feel like I love those trigger points. It's the other trigger points where you'll show up at a spot that something bad happened at, or why is this place so important? It's where I had the most epic blow up argument at, or like, those type things. Yeah, I kind of like wish I could just let go of, like those memories would just fade, if you will. Um, and I think I don't know about you, but because of what you just said about like maybe not remembering a voice or whatever, I feel like I'm always in fear of losing the good memories. Not really, like I can remember bits and pieces, but not that full day. But that tragic day, I remember everything,
Hmm.
or that big argument, I can recite it, you know. And I'm a little worried about that, about like why does the mind process it that way? Why can we remember just a little bit of the happiest day of our life, details here, detail, but the worst day of your life you can just hammer it out, and like every second of that day, that's an interesting process about how the mind works like that, and I don't know, what that means, but it certainly does play a role in my life. There's no doubt about that. I mean, how I approach everything I do is based on what I remember happening to me, good and bad.
Yeah, most definitely. And like everything else, we have phases throughout our lives, right? We have our childhood, we have our teenage years, we have our young adult years, and then we grow into adulthood where you start to be evolutionizing and becoming a parent and becoming grandparents and things like that. So each little pockets of everyone's life, they feel like they've grown, hopefully, anyway. They're not the same person and continuing to move forward because like all of these different pockets throughout your life, they are going to come with good and they are going to come with bad.
Yeah.
And it is important to continue remembering the good because like you can't go back. You can never go back, but you can only go forward. So continuing to build relationships, continuing to build memories that you can inevitably reminisce about. Like for example, sometimes you have to set up things moments that you know are going to be memorable.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
the one of the last nights that we were in North Carolina, Emily and I, where we recorded those fun games. How well do we know each other? Had some drinks, had some laughs, and just had a good time.
yeah.
That's memories that I'm talking about that I feel like it's good when they're not as set up as things like that.
Right.
But if you are one of those people who are always just running and gunning throughout life, it's good to take time to set aside where you're like, okay, let's plan this event or this little pocket to where this can be a memory that we will remember for the rest of our life. So it's things like that that you have to continue thinking about. And I mean, it can be exhausting because you're going through life just trying to survive, pay bills, take care of your kids, what have you. But you have to also remember to take little pockets of time out of your weeks, months, days, years to make those memories for the people around you because we're not all going to be here forever. So
No, no,
it's very
yeah.
important to remember those things because we inevitably just want to be happy. That's it. We just want to be happy, loved, cherished. And it's important to practice those gratitudes and making time for the small, joyful rituals. Because I
Absolutely.
know, like, Thanksgivings, Christmases, things like that, those days, those times, those are what carry us through generations and telling stories to the younger generation who may or may not be around for people in the long run, you know?
Right. And I feel like that's like the biggie for people, right? Like holidays or like the graduations or whatever. For me though, I think my favorite memories, the ones I like to share, the ones like I want to just bring around and everything, are not those.
Hmm.
My favorite, like I had the best time. I remember staying up till 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning with Emily, talking about how. And it started because her and her friends were hanging out at this little spot in the neighborhood. They would all get together and just hang out at this spot. And it sparked a memory for me about how me and my friends would hang out at the green thing, which was an electric. If you guys know neighborhoods and the electric feed, and you guys know what I'm talking about with the big green generator looking thing, we would all hang out there and talk for hours and be goofy and play. But it sparked that conversation, and it was transcending about how my generation and her generation were typically doing the same thing. They were hanging out, and it was a great memory. And I like to share those kind of memories about like little things that seem obscure or insignificant, but really brought the most joy, right? And those type things, hanging out with friends at night by a certain place or so, those are the memories that bring me the most joy, I think. Hanging doing the Black Friday when it was Black Friday and you had to get there, on Thursday afternoon if you wanted to, and hanging out all night, and those conversations, or freezing our asses off in the car, hearing them snore. And that's a memory that brings me great joy to see these two beautiful people that I love more than anything in the world knocked out cold, snoring like beasts that were going to tear me apart, kind of a thing. Little memories like that just, those are the ones I tend to go to more than, oh, you remember on this Christmas or you remember on this. It's like, and really nowadays there's like, we are fortunate enough to live in an age and time where you can literally document everything.
Hmm.
Who doesn't have this with them at all times? So if there's some really big memorable thing happening and you can't just back in my day there was no, you had better log it right here because there was no capturing those special moments like you can today. And I think that's such a great benefit of the time that we live in right now, because as the memories fade, you do now have the ability to capture them and be able to go back and relive them in a way that I couldn't in my generation. It had to be all here. So, yeah, how it's kind of changed is just unbelievable.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that we posed the conversation like last week in class. If with the technology, with like VR headsets, with encompassing things that you are immersed in when it comes to futuristic or past technology to where you're able to put on a VR headset or be in a room and press play on a memory and go back to your memories and completely relive them. Would you do that? And would that be scary for people because would they inevitably just keep reliving the same memories instead of keep progressing towards the future and making new memories? So
Right.
it's always a balancing act because like right now I think we're in a sweet spot. Like if something were like invented like that where you could literally go back and revisit memories and live the memories, I think that's dangerous because people would essentially just live up to a certain point and then go back and just keep reliving the same thing every single day. It'd be like Groundhog Day every single day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they wouldn't essentially continue growing as individuals, continue raising families, or continue, trying out different experiences because right now we're in the United States and we're completely differently cultured every four sectors of this beautiful country. But then you go outside of the United States where the world is drastically different from where we live right now.
Mm.
So why not try to experience every single little bit of that and continuing to make those beautiful memories and to
Yeah.
be cultured and to continue like leaving along a legacy and memories that you can keep telling those stories to future generations. I think that's always a fun thing. And to where now, like we were talking about with the phone, like future stories for like say my great grandkids. I can record a story that happened literally on our podcast and then my great grandchildren can look, oh hey, freaking, July 14th of 2025, great granddad recorded an episode of Everything's Okay, and here's
Yeah.
what they talked about memories. So it's a very interesting time we live in
It
because you want to
really
make the
is.
most of it, you want to cherish everything, but you also want to continue looking forward.
And a couple of things. Yeah, and because guess I'm old, so I can't pretend like I'm always hip and on it. But Ariana Grande did a video for one of her songs like that, where she was able to go and watch a memory, but she only got to do it once. And once the
Hmm.
memories were gone, she dies.
Yeah.
And it's a very trippy. It is more like a horror. These are like the most prized moments of her life. But as she's watching them, she's basically dying and
Hmm.
but she gets to get really creepy, but it's a concept though, like of what you said, this VR reality where she gets to relive these moments in life and chooses to stay there. And that's a creepy thing. And the reason I bring that up and touched on what you said there is because I think that it's critical when we're talking about memories. It's okay to have memories and fondly think of the past, but you have to live in the now,
Hmm.
because you can end up really hurting yourself and really holding yourself back if you are constantly living with your memories, right? Especially the bad ones, because they will affect your now and your future if that is where you are living. And I think that it's critical for people to be able to fondly remember, but also know that you can't stay there. You have
Yeah.
to live in the now. Memories are great, good ones and bad ones, but the bad ones where we tend to stay more often will crush us sometimes. Look, traumatic relationships for me, no doubt, keep me cautious about future relationships or
Yeah.
current relationships. And it's those type things where if you linger too long there, the loss in my life constantly has me thinking about how long do I have left? Should I be cautious in what I'm doing? Should I be like, and you can get yourself in real trouble and really, I think, find yourself being held back in life a lot if you can't get out of the way of your memories. And so I think it's just, I really want to say that for the listeners out there. It's like you have got to live in the now. Make those memories, cherish those times, be able to leave that legacy for your family and friends, but don't stay there. Like that's key, right?
Most definitely, it really is. But we do have some tools and resources that we want to pass along to you. In the books category, we have The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. for understanding trauma and memories. And of course, another book would be What My Bones Know by Stephanie Foe, a raw memoir about living in a with complex PTSD. Both of those I definitely feel like will help a lot of people through what they're going through. Right now, I'm reading a book called Atomic Habits
Mm,
by James Clear.
hmm.
It is very, very good. Just talking about how the small habits add up and being very specific about the habits that you create.
Yeah.
Don't just say I'm going to go exercise after I get off this Zoom call. Go say I'm going to do 100 push-ups after I close my laptop. Be more precise about what your goal setting is. We got a couple of different apps and journal prompts as well. Apps Reflectly for daily reflections and Calm. We love Calm
Oh
for
yeah.
meditation and grounding when memories resurface. Dustin, I know you have some journaling prompts as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think you and I journal regularly, and
Mhm.
I think most people in our lives do it. Um, this is an interesting one. I think we all do this. You know, write a memory that makes you feel really strong, makes you, and I would suggest a happy one. Make one that makes you feel very strongly and passionately about a happy time in your life. But I think one that everybody should key in on, and I think this is an interesting one, mental health wise, a memory that you would like to see with compassion instead of shame. Something that you just associate your past with really badly, and revisit that and journal about how you can take that from a bad memory to a good memory. What came out of that? I think that's something that you could use the journaling for, to retreat inward to move forward, and I think that's positive. And then of course, obviously, like we were saying, take time set aside and make a new awesome memory this week. Just do something that's like awesome and then write it down. Like so you don't forget it ever. Like, this was an awesome day, here's why. And just have that for like I said, your legacy and for passing on to your people. Yeah, so that's some journaling ideas, but I think the one that's really going to be the most beneficial mental health wise is take that one that causes you some trauma and try to shape it in a different way. Look at it a different way and have some compassion about what happened. I think that's key.
Yeah, most definitely. And of course, some key points from this episode to remember. Our memories are powerful, but they don't have control for our future.
Yes.
We can learn to cherish the good ones and heal from the hurt ones. And you're allowed to forgive yourself. You're allowed to move forward. So always, always remember to do that. That is for sure. And of course, our call to action this week, if you do one small thing to make a memory for the future, you will be thankful for it. That's for sure. Make a memory with a laugh, with a friend, a quiet moment of peace with your loved one, or just a simple act of kindness. Something small. It doesn't have
Absolutely.
to be anything crazy.
It doesn't.
But as always, guys, thank you for listening today. We appreciate all of your love and support. Of course, this podcast is dedicated to anyone who's ever had an uphill battle with mental health. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, but the most important thing is to always keep getting back up and remember that you have a community, you have a family. We're here for you. Us here at Crazy Ant Media are. So if
Absolutely.
you ever feel like you need to reach out, please do so on any of our social media platforms or at our email, info@crazyantmedia.com. If you have any thoughts, comments, concerns, please feel free to reach out to us. We are on X, Instagram, Threads at Everything's OKP. And of course, you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and watch and like that video on YouTube. And now, as always, guys, remember that everything's okay.